Americans are often fascinated by cults. Understanding the strange phenomenon is the mission of today's guest. We welcome Paulette J. Buchanan to Saving America to explore this important topic in her recent book. Welcome. This is Dr. David D. Shines, this special edition of Saving America. Paulette J. Buchanan has an MA in European History, a BA in History and Political Science and Public Policy. She is a former educator who has taught courses across all levels, even at the Navy Education Office at the Groton, Connecticut submarine base. Since 2007, she's worked alongside other victims and legislators in an effort to bring about needed changes in the law to better protect individuals and society. She is a member of the International Cultic Studies Association and speaks about topics such as cults and the law. We welcome her for her first appearance on Saving America to speak about a recent book. It's quite a title, Fighting for Justice, Religious Fraud, Mental Illness, and the Collapse of Law and Order. This book tells the true story of her quest to protect herself and her family from abuse and attacks from her brothers that continued from childhood into adulthood. Welcome, Paulette.
Thank you for having me, and I really appreciate you doing this series, and I hope it's a great help to other people.
Well, we're fascinated by it, and of course, we all Americans have been exposed over the years to, of course, the Jim Jones tragedy that ended up in South America, but it started in the United States. Here in Texas, the Branch Davidian, David Koresh, and the horrible thing that happened there some years ago. And so, as you know, our format is to ask you 3 questions to get our audience up to speed on what you're up to. And our first one is briefly describe for our audience the life experiences that caused you to write this book.
Well, my brothers have actually been problems for me since my childhood. My earliest memories, I am the last born in the family of 4 older brothers. I am the only female. But in talking with my mother and other family members, a lot of their mental health issues really started before I was even born. Issues with superior thinking, that they thought they were superior over others, and no empathy really for other people, no respect for authority in any way, whether it was our parents, teachers, whatever, and disrespect toward peers, disrespect toward each other. You know, there wasn't a lot of mental health available back in the 50s when they were kids, and really not so much in the 60s, started in the 70s, a little bit more in the 80s. But by that time they were adults. And, you know, there wasn't always abuse in the family, as any abusive relationship in any family situation. There were some good times we had. Neither one of my parents beat up on each other. They weren't abusive toward each other. They really didn't, by the time I came along, they really didn't even argue anymore. So they tried to keep the peace. They instilled in us the ideas of right and wrong, the golden rule type of thing, you know, don't do to somebody else what you don't want them doing to you, and all that. But again, their attitude was to reject that. And drugs and alcohol definitely made it worse in their teen years, and then later as they got into their 20s. And I tried, and my mother tried. My father died when I was 10. My mother tried and I tried to help them, to get them to see sense, to have them understand the consequences of their own behavior. But when you're dealing with somebody who is narcissistic and really pathological, and it kind of overlaps a little the psychosis of believing that they truly are superior to other people, I think, and maybe in a way to hide their own insecurity, things like that. But any efforts we made, any efforts that their former friends made to help them was all rejected, usually in the form of backstabbing. Sometimes they would apologize, crocodile tears, all of that. And it was never really of any substance. And that's very, very difficult. One of the things I write about in my book is there are no 2 worse emotions to have together than intense grief and intense anger. And, you know, everybody has free will. You can do whatever you want to do. You can't force somebody to pick their lives up and really start to develop a sense of a conscience and an empathy. You just can't force people to do that. I ended up distancing myself from my family, my brothers, when I was in my 20s. My mother and I basically tried to protect ourselves from them. Each one individually did their own specific damage. But my one brother, he is the one who runs an online cult and claims he's a prophet of Jesus, that Jesus has commanded him to be the hand of God's wrath. And, one of the things I write about in my book is that every famous cult leader you hear about, Jim Jones, David Koresh, any of those, they always had obscure beginnings. And that's the thing, is what makes this even more dangerous today is the internet. I mean, within seconds, you have a global outreach. You can reach any number of people with any number of lies and scams. And that's the problem, is that it is a hunting ground. I warn people about that. As a teacher, I used to warn my students. I used to warn the parents. You got to be careful out there in internet land. And I have a very, very limited social media presence, virtually none, really. I check it every now and again, but I don't really engage in that because there are people you have to be careful about. So a civil rights attorney actually urged me to write this book. It took me about 8.5 years to write. Went through close to about a year of editing process, self-editing, and also hiring an editor to go through everything, working with my publisher and all. I wanted to make sure that this book really covered everything that needs to be covered, and to help people, to inform people, to educate people about the problem with the fact that you can have somebody, whether it's a cult person or whatever, when they start stalking you and harassing you, which is a common cult tactic, whether you were previously in that cult or not, they can attack people by stalking them. And my brother did that, basically to try to intimidate and silence.
This is Dr. David D. Shine for Saving America. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on your favorite platform.